Well, I think in some respects, we do have a similar problems, and a big risk was the staff welfare, ensuring that they have their mental health and well-being cared for in a similar situation to the military. So I have a military background as well, and utilising some of the contacts I've made through that to implement here has been very useful, because we realise it's a similar environment in some respects, because it's a very austere environment. Um, PPE for people who are not used to wearing it can be, quite a frightening area. We're also taking the staff away from their normal area of work. So they may be working in a completely different area. A dermatology nurse may be working in a critical care unit. That can be very frightening and challenging in itself. But also, we're taking them perhaps away from their friends and the teams they normally work in. And so having teams to actually have a buddy system, so they can actually work off each other, and so they can recognize, well, actually, are you feeling a bit distressed about what you've seen just now? We've got mechanisms in place that we've really learned from the military in some respects. And that really came back to an NHS guidelines for England that came out only a couple of weeks ago. And within that, there were certain recommendations, that are particularly valid for the COVID-19 pandemic across the country. Actually, we can implement them quickly. And we got in touch with the people who wrote that and said, some help here to make sure that we can build a very robust support service for our staff. They want to be reassured that there is the PPE kit here. And we've had that right the way from the start, that nobody will be short of PPE in this hospital. And we've been very fortunate. We haven't had any problem with that. And I think that's the starting point. Their safety is paramount. And then if they do feel that they're stressed or anything like this, they've got somewhere to turn, and they're not just cast aside. And that also goes for when they leave as well. Well, when the teams come on for their shift, they are each pair are given somebody to look after. So you're given your buddy to work with, to keep an eye on you and make sure that you are debriefed at the end of the shift. And then there's a supervisor as well. The ward supervisor is a matron. Just makes sure that all the buddies are happy. And it's somebody, if you actually have eyes on with each other when you first go in on the shift. So you recognise, okay, I'm your buddy for the day. They give for the shift, and they introduce themselves, and then they go and speak to each other after the shift to make sure that everything's been done correctly. And if they've got upset because there's been a difficult time with a patient, or there's been a death, just to sit down and recognise that it's time to sit down, have a cup of tea, and talk through things. And that works very, very well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as James has said, they've got some really good NHS guidelines, but what we found in the military is that not one thing works for everybody. And so James understands that, that the veterans have a lot to offer. And so what we've done is we've looked at our experiences with the veterans through traumatic experiences and developed an online field guide, if you like, to self-care. And because the veterans have co-produced that with us, then we know that these are things that have worked for them, and we hope will work for NHS staff. And the last thing I want to say really is that what we've also seen with our veterans is what we call post-traumatic growth. So there is light at the end of the tunnel. If, as James is doing, you care for your staff's welfare right from the beginning, and you look at what they really need in the scenario that they're in, they will come out of that. They will learn from that, and they'll be, that will help them in the future to cope with other things. So I think we all want to share the NHS experience, the veterans experience, what we've learned to help for heroes, and help us support staff today and in the future.